Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to be here and talk about something that is very close to my heart. As the director of an ecologically responsible property within central India, I've been on a mission to define, introduce, grow, and sustain the charm of Kanha and its rustic grandeur through the medium of tourism that honors traditions and values. My team are committed towards ecological restoration and meaningful long term engagements with the land, the wildlife, and the people of central India. I believe, and I seriously believe, that the tourism in India across its various facets, be it the properties or travel organizations and tour entities, can act as a symbol to bond the people of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, whether they belong to the urban or indigenous background. Curated travel programs can play a very important role in serving as a connection to embrace the heartbeats of India's indigenous and tribal communities with visitors far and wide. From my personal professional journey, I've observed that visiting tribal people and indigenous communities over the course of the last decade has not only become more popular but also much easier to do. Men and women from India's indigenous tribes that once actually stared at us from coffee table books, glossy magazines, are now so accessible to travelers. Responsible travelers, as I like to call them. Many people find ancient ways of life fascinating. I mean, I'm actually obsessed about it. We're living in an era that is dominated by a world of concrete, supermarkets, fashion, celebrity culture, stressful jobs, and unfortunately, diminishing community spirit. It's of no surprise that every other visitor to my jungle lodge in Kanha finds the idea of people living together close to nature in the same way they have for centuries extremely appealing. For many travelers, there's nothing like bridging centuries of modern development and making a connection with people whose lives are so very different from our own. And those of us who are fortunate enough to have visited and listened properly with, we've also seen that there's so much they can teach us, and their society, even though it's different, teaches us a lot. And we learn a lot from their world. Many indigenous groups in India have been unfortunately marginalized, and I've seen that on a personal level. And they've been derided by other communities. And for some of these, meeting people with the genuine interest and respect for them is important. However, the journey to meeting tourists and inviting them into their villages or homes is a very complex one. And it's the responsibility of tourism entities to handle this in an ethical and responsible way. Integrating tribal culture in guest itineraries involves extensive onus by a tourism expert who knows exactly how to facilitate a form of tourism that is led by and empowers the indigenous people living in and around the region. I call it CBT, or community based tourism, at its very best. In a two-way street where tourism both provides local employment and income for education, development, and conservation initiatives, while at the same time giving both indigenous people and traveling guests a unique opportunity for cultural exchange. And you can actually see that at a very personal level when you see what I've been doing with the Singinawa Conservation Foundation. It is often with the help of an outside facilitator that the community becomes aware of the commercial and social value placed on their natural and cultural heritage and is encouraged to become actively involved in the conservation of these resources. So I've, basically penned down some of my suggestions and I would like to share it with all of you. The best advice is to be sensitive to local people's reaction to your visit and also being sensitive to their history and way of life. Traveling with a tour company with a proven track record and a guide who speaks the same language. So, you should have somebody who speaks Baiga, Gond, all the various languages in central India if you're traveling there, or somebody who knows, the languages of the Minas if you're traveling in Ranthambore. So have somebody who speaks a local language. Progressive tourist properties are actively engaging with guides from the local community to ensure that the traveling guests benefit from their knowledge. Guests should be encouraged to take time to read up online on the people they may be interacting with. The Singinawa Lodge library has a lot of books on indigenous art, on indigenous culture. So our guests are encouraged to read about them so that they already know, what they are going to experience. A big part of any retreat is also what one eats. At Singinawa Jungle Lodge, for example, we take pride in giving our guests a taste of maua. It's a region's local brew. The smell of fermenting maua, it's called Maduka longifolia. I'm very fond of botany, so we love telling them about botany. Flowers and wood smoke hanging heavy in the air makes for a perfect do-it-yourself session. Well, I'm also a literature student, and I love Oscar Wilde's famous words: life imitates art far more than art imitates life. So I've been greatly inspired by these words. Tourist properties can line up visits to museum and cultural centers which are preserving indigenous art of the region. For example, the Kanha Museum of Life and Art, which is a 1,000 square feet museum existing within the Singinawa estate, sings an epic of the native Gond, Baiga, Bhil, and Bastar artisans and their labors of love. The pottery village experience within the premises of the museum is an extension of our collaboration with unsung heroes from the Baiga community. So you can also, visit them, buy their pots and all the various things that they make. And it's very interesting to see that because the Baiga community is painstakingly keeping the aura of the region's pottery alive. Opening the doors of art forms to visiting travelers is a gateway to culture, to people, to conversations and learning, and just an overall universal connection with the guests. Hosting art installations in the open. In fact, we are curating a walkthrough art installation, first of its kind, kind of walkthrough in which is going to be an extension of the museum at Singinawa. So you can actually see art installations in the wild that talk about conservation apart from wildlife. So it's very important to host art installation in the open with a focus on your region. It's a visual learning experience for guests as well as an approach which others can certainly put into practice. Curating musical experiences for the guests in conjunction with the natives of the region and the symbolic association of a dance form with the corresponding time of the year is a perfect way to immerse within the aura of music and sounds of the indigenous communities. Musical nights can act as platforms for guests to watch magical performances, maybe around a bonfire, and that's a perfect time to talk about local Gond folklore and jungle stories and how it's woven into their habitat. In most cases, the guests too end up joining in the celebrations, in the dance forms. Singinawa encourages all its guests to participate in village and market fair visits, a practice I urge tourist properties to take up in a focused manner. The daily activities for the guests at the lodge allow our guests to observe these communities and get involved in the day to day affairs like music, tribal dancing, painting, pottery, food and costumes, organizing several performances and workshops. The shop by the canopy at Singinawa houses curated handicrafts, which I've done personally, and other artifacts made by the Kond and Baiga tribes and other indigenous artisans of India. Tourism entities need to consciously create platforms for guests to take back creations made by tribal communities, a move which should go a long way in supporting heritage art forms. I'm always available to share my experiences with the industry fraternity. Let's all come together and share knowledge to create more responsible and enriching experiences for our guests. We live in an incredible India. Let's embrace all that it has to offer. It's time to get going and explore. I would also like to share a beautiful video of the Kanha Museum of Life and Art that was curated by my close friend, Dr. Alka Pandey, to give a feel of the cultural ethos of that region. I'm just going to request the TOF team to please share the video now. Okay, I think there are quite a few questions. I'm going to do I'm going to answer all the questions now. And then, since I don't know if everybody knows, I'm also an art gallerist, and I promote indigenous art forms of India. So I am going to take you all, it's going to be like a sneak peek view of Must Art Gallery. And I've curated some masterpieces that are going to be spoken about. And before that, I'm just going to answer all these questions. Let me just.
Let's allow the individuals to ask the questions.
No, I can see some questions are penned down.
So feel free for them to come on and ask those questions. So we've got a number of questions here. Let's so thanks for that lovely video. I mean, just shows the magnificence of cultural art and how skilled these people are, and to some extent what we're missing to a great extent in terms of people visiting, from abroad particularly, but also, the domestic community, when we don't incorporate tribal communities into activities and in a way that allows them to be the owners of those. And what you've done is fantastic. So let's just take a few questions. So Prativa, would you like to just come online and ask Tulika direct? We can let people interact here a little bit. Prativa, you there? So Prativa did ask how do you find your communities react to visitors? Is that something that's taken them a long time to get used to? Tulika?
Well, I've been going to Kanha National Park for more than 27 years now. And I've also been visiting, since I am my dad was a owner of a tea estate. So I've, frequently visited parts of Bengal and visited a lot of indigenous communities. They are very open to welcoming you as long as you are sensitive towards them. They like a lot of sensitivity when you approach them. You should be you should be very appreciative. And if you are, and if you work towards the community, like everybody in Kanha knows that I work very closely with the communities. I'm helping the Bhor Singh school, the schools in the Koka village. So they are very welcoming to our guests. So it all stems down to being very sensitive towards them. Then there's another question which is very similar, which says, what is your take on photography of tribes in the village or in the weekly market? I again said that in my introductory speech, if you can call that you need to be very sensitive when you're photographing these tribes. You have to take their permission, you have to take their consent. In fact, I've just been a publisher of a book called Jal Jungle Jameen, which is the first of its kind indigenous book on the art and culture of Chhattisgarh. And my team of photographers did photograph tribes all over Chhattisgarh when we were making this book, and Dr. Pandey was writing about it. So it was, we took a lot of permissions, we took their consent before we photographed them, and they were very willing.
Yeah, good. And because that is, one of the issues in places like Chhattisgarh and certainly Orissa, they actually closed down tourism because it was so focused on the sort of camera clicking junkie, and that is a major issue, and one as a traveler, and certainly as an operator taking travelers, has to understand that actually you wouldn't like that sort of approach done on you, so why should you impose it on others? So what are the sort of absolute takeaways? What is the key to allowing people to ingratiate themselves? I mean, for me, it's often about time, giving people time, give them time to do that. What are the key ways in which you found people react best, or tribal communities react best to visitors?
If you are giving back to them, if somehow you manage to do some, small deed, whatever if you take some gifts for them, or it's just not going there and start, clicking your camera. If you take some little gifts for them, or you probably give them some plants, or anything, because they rely on nature to sustain themselves. So maybe our guests at our lodge, they take bamboo saplings for them, they take stationery for their children. So I suggest some sort of token in kind goes a long way, and then they're more welcoming, because they realize that they're getting back when you're meeting them. And of course, if you buy their art, then of course, then you're definitely helping sustain them. So I think that's a good way of going about it.
But I think it's not a good idea to give anything to the children, because it teaches them begging.
Well, actually, many of them don't have notebooks, they don't have stationery, and it's not really begging, because they are actually studying there in the local village schools. So when you're giving them stationery and you're giving them books on wildlife, it's not really
You can give,
begging of any.
ma'am, you can give to the school, not to the children directly. Because in that case, when next group of tourists go, they ask, give me pen, give me books, give me this and that. So that's a very bad practice being done by tour operators in many areas.
Well, I beg to differ, because anyway, they are living in such meager things, and just and giving a few pens for their education would just help them, uplift them. It's not going to take away from them.
No, I think you can give it to the parents is good, but to give it to the school teacher, he will give after you leave the place, not when you are there.
Yeah,
So,
but yeah, the thing is, it can vary from region to region and person to person. I think what is most important is that I think the people need to feel respected. And even if they ask, I think the children are like children. So even if they ask, I think sometimes it's okay to go into that. And of course, it should not, they have to be groomed into not to be really the, or asking and like that or whatever. But more important is that, a childlike behavior, which is okay. I mean, that's what I would think.
well,
So,
in my view,
you would have more
in my view, when you visit the tribal area, particularly sensitive area, you should not take your camera with you.
Yeah, these are very broad
camera,
things,
the moment you have the camera, you try to see the things with your lens, not with your eyes.
I mean, we can't control people. So
I mean,
you have to control people when you're traveling to the sensitive area. That's the responsible tourism.
No, well, you are right to a great extent. I mean, photography does create a major barrier. It puts so we know it's a major issue, and I would encourage people who are photographers to spend half an hour just talking and ingratiating, maybe buy some of the art, that sort of stuff. Then you can bring it out. So it's a different way of getting them involved, seeing that you're not just taking and fleeing. So it's a two-way street in terms of doing it. And wouldn't you agree with that, Tulika? You've probably been on the end of that photographic sort of
you have to give time. You can't visit one day and take a picture. If you go there 2 days, or you have little time, then sit down, relax, have a chat with them, then take a consent and take a picture. But what's happened, unfortunately, in tourism industry, people get down from their car, start clicking fast. That's really happening in every of the whatever travel area you're talking. I've been traveling also a lot and in tribal tourism for the last 20 years. And that's the problem we face in each places where you go. And even now the tribes are coming and starting, give me money before you take picture. So that's really very sad affairs now at the moment.
Yeah, it's undoubtedly true. It's a problem, but it's a problem worldwide. It's not a problem just what's the name? So Tulika, I don't know how you would encourage that relationship. You've talked about gifts and things, but it's time, I think, more than anything else. Give people time before getting to that point where you say, do you mind if I take a photograph?
Exactly. Constant only, yeah.
Absolutely, I completely agree with both of you. And you have to work with the community. Your lodge has to work with the community. Your lodge should be well known in the community, for working with them, for doing for them. And then automatically when your naturalist or your manager goes with the guest, they welcome you with open arms. In fact, I'm yet to meet a child or a villager in any of my travelers asking me for money, and I've traveled extensively all over India, and I've been to rural parts of India, because the first thing I ask them is that, what is the local handicraft of that region? What are they producing? Are they doing any kind of art form? And since I am an indigenous art gallerist, if they are painting something on their walls, I like to offer them various mediums of art, like paper or canvases, and encourage them to paint on that. And they're very excited about that, because when they see when they come to the cities and they see exhibitions of their art forms, they're very thrilled with the whole concept.
Yeah, so normally what we do, we ask our guests to come with the pictures of their family, their pets, their landscape, their houses. So we start conversation with showing those pictures first. Look, they live in this kind of house. This is their agriculture. They're doing potatoes, this and that, and we start showing pictures of their landscape, European landscape, American landscape, where they're from. And it builds a relationship first, and people are curious. They want to see what the picture is all about. Then slowly you can start conversation, and again, it creates atmosphere that, okay, we can take a couple of pictures of your landscape, your houses, to show back in home.
I think it's great.
There's another question here, if we wouldn't mind. Sonia, do you want to ask it? You kindly put up if you're happy to come live and ask Tulika direct. Are you there? Are you
Yes,
ready?
yes. Hi, Julian. Hi, Tulika.
Great. I thought it was me.
Hi.
Go ahead. I'll ask later. No more.
Thank you, Sonia. So, Tulika, thank you for the presentation. And I have always been wanting to visit this museum, but unfortunately, whenever I have traveled in off season, I could not visit. I would like to share my experience with you of my Gujarat travels, and I would like to ask you a question. So in Gujarat, what I've seen that the tribal people are really spoiled. They always ask for money because the product that they make, it's the tourists, especially the foreign tourists, they cannot purchase those products. It's uh, it's difficult because they're not equipped to pack them and give it to the tourists, so they cannot buy it. But when clients are visiting these settlements, the local communities, they always expect money because their products are not being purchased, so they always expect money, and if you don't give money, they become little hostile. So and since Gujarat is like promoted as community-based tourism, textile tours, ethnic tourism, so this is a real challenge there. Coming to central India now, the whole focus is on safaris. So our communities are still protected. So I would like to know that if there is if you could do the village tours that you have spoken about, cultural immersions that you have spoken about, is there a price to it? Like if when you're talking about community-based tourism, if a certain if the whole package comes with certain price that is going to the community directly, because for the tourist it may not be possible to buy the products unless they are equipped to handle it properly, courier it to them. And how do we protect their culture? Because yes, as Kurt said, begging, I have seen in Gujarat, like children have started begging whenever they see tourists, they will say pesa pesa pesa. Even in Odisha, when you click the pictures, they will ask for money, then only they will allow to get clicked. So these are very sensitive issues, and what we do at Abercrombie and Kent, we have a document that we give it to the guides to train them how to handle such situations. So as a tour operators, we all have to come together to solve this issue. Otherwise, their culture will be spoiled, and the whole experience will be diluted. It won't be an authentic experience.
Let's. Do you want to, Tulika? Do you want to answer that?
I could answer that for her. Basically, I as I stressed in the very beginning, that you need to be very sensitive when you are dealing with indigenous communities. You have to respect their their viewpoint, their mindset. And as other people have mentioned on this forum, that we do not want to encourage any kind of begging or asking for money. So it is the responsibility of the traveler to ensure that they do not hand out money, they do not encourage those practices. And going back to the art forms, and it's not that when you say that it is not available to visitors, it is the job